It's great to be here. I'm really thrilled to have the pleasure of moderating this discussion with two people that I've had the pleasure of working with actually in different capacities. Bram Gonshore, I work with at Music Canada and has also worked with me at my festival. And Nicole is amazing because she's also my contact at Fontana, which is the distribution partner for my label, Roaring Girl Records. I'll give you a little bit of background about both of them, music industry, but also music lovers. Nicole's worked with Cadence and Fontana Music Group over the last 2 years and has recently relocated to Calgary as a Western rep. So she's also involved with Music Calgary and is passionate about music journalism. Excited to be back seeing live music. We're so jealous, Nicole, that you get live music out there in Calgary with the Stampede that started last week. Bram, again, also a music fan. Bram oversees the Gold and Platinum program at Music Canada and helps lead ongoing projects and programs that are aimed at strengthening Canada's music ecosystem and also advancing Music Canada's strategic advocacy. He works directly with our labels, our member labels, as well as independent artists, songwriters, and producers. Bram delivers our coveted certifications and award plaques celebrating accomplishments of artists on a daily basis, which we'll be hearing about today. But he is first and foremost an avid music fan, supporting local record shops, amplifying rising artists, building collaborative playlists with friends, and prior to COVID-19, traveling the world to see live music of all genres. And I think he actually lives in close proximity to a very great record store, which may be diminishing his pocket money. But really great to have both of you here. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Miranda. That is true. Yes, definitely got to support the record stores during this hard time. Thank you, Miranda.
Nicole, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be a part of this today.
So we want to get started. Data is so important. We're going to talk about why and also just how to keep good data hygiene. And just in order to keep it relevant for everybody that's listening, artist entrepreneurs come in so many shapes and sizes because it could be just putting out your own music. It could be putting out music of others. I think we'll look at the way that you deal with things too as a distribution partner, but also what people can do themselves in the sort of DIY aspect with TuneCore or CD Baby or Indie Pool if they want to release music. And we're gonna take a look at that. I think one of the big keys for me as a record label owner and as an artist when I'm thinking about putting out an album is really planning backwards. We spend so much time writing the album, we spend so much time recording the album, and then there's sort of because we want to get it out into the world, sometimes there is less emphasis on actually the planning process about trying to structure the release. But this is really key. And data comes into this, and so does sort of workflow. So in order to sort of not make, my emergency, my crisis, your emergency, Nicole, as a distro rep, and looking at sort of planning a release, what's the workflow timing look like if I wanted to release an album?
Yeah, so generally for us, we like to get everything that we possibly can, usually about a month out, and that would likely be for the first single. And it is very helpful to have the full timeline right out the front, so we kind of have an idea on our end. We can plan our pitching. So yeah, for the assets, just kind of what we require, we always ask for a metadata sheet, audio files, artwork, lyrics, and then we do our pitching assets as well. Just we kind of have it all out front. So I can kind of go over, I guess, for the metadata, because that's kind of like the trickiest part.
Yeah, let's start there, because we want to know that's sort of the fingerprint, right? And we want to make sure that everyone is paid when your music is played. So that's what the metadata really is. So if you could go over that would be super.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So we have our own sheet that we put together. I'm sure they're all very similar for TuneCore and CD Baby as well. So I would recommend, if you're doing it on your own, just the more information you have is the best. We always see with metadata requirements always changing with different DSPs and what they're used for. So if you have it, it's just great to send along. So yeah, just for some points on the basic information for the release name and the artist name, just making sure it's formatted correctly. We can't submit with an artist name in a release name. That usually comes in featured artists or remixers. So just kind of being aware of where they would fit in with that. Also, writers and composers is a very important aspect. It's just the best part for getting paid. So that's kind of the main idea that, you know, everyone wants. So as long as we have that correct information, so having the correct publishing information, the correct PRO, if you're doing a cover song, just really being aware of entering the right writers and their publishing. We always recommend a good way to find it if you can't. You can always look on ASCAP or BMI. It's a good way to find the songwriters that way. And then the codes, the kind of tricky part. So we always ask for a UPC, a CAT number, and an ISRC. So the ISRC is the most important for tracking your streaming. It's kind of like a song's fingerprint. So it identifies it across all platforms. And I'm sure Bram will speak to that later too for certification. So you definitely want to make sure that you have that. You'll always need a different ISRC for different versions of the song. So we supply the ISRC codes, and I believe Music Canada can supply as well. So that's something we can always do on our end. Also with the UPC, a UPC is the product identification. So if we're submitting different versions, I can get into that with audio as well. It's when we submit for standard audio, HRA, that kind of thing. And the catalog number is for your label specific. It's just something for you to identify through your releases. So you can set up however you kind of like. It's usually, you know, kind of 6-digit code. So those ones are usually pretty easy. And then for genre, we always recommend just making sure you submit for the correct genre for your music. There is a lot of crossover potential on DSPs. But they do go to different editors at DSPs. So just making sure it kind of falls into the right hands and is looked over by the right people. And we usually ask for price codes, and you know, that's not as relevant obviously on streaming anymore, but it is still used on some platforms. So just kind of being aware of that, especially, you know, on Apple pre-orders and that kind of thing. Apple still does take liner notes as well. So that's something that can be considered too. And there's the P and C line, which is the copyright line. So that's just generally, you know, the label, or it can be, if it's self-released, it'll just be under your name. So that's always required as well. And the last, probably the most important now, is lyrics. Lyrics is asked for at a lot of platforms, and especially, you know, on Facebook and Instagram, like that's become a big thing as well. And it was previously, we didn't require it. Now it's just become very relevant. So always very good to include. It's good to submit the lyrics as they're spoken rather than as chorus verse. So that's always helpful for us. And our new thing that we ask for is a TikTok timestamp. So for TikTok submissions, we supply a 45-second sample. So that's just good to be aware of as well with new DSPs. And yeah.
So it's a lot, Nicole. But it seems as though, you know, it seems as though technology is changing so quickly. And like you said, lyrics didn't used to be a thing that was really necessary with each single and those kind of things. But as things move, like you mentioned, Instagram, and I'm finding on Instagram stories when I'm adding music that now that comes up as a lyric. And so again, it goes back to your point, which is just the more info that you can give and provide and make available, and keep updating your distributor as well as things come available, because there might be these other options like the TikTok timestamp. But I'm going to date myself on that because I'm just still new to TikTok. Bram's been schooling me. I got a couple questions though coming out of that. One from the chat here, but also, and I'm going to add a little bit to it. When you're putting out an album, and you also have singles that are timed out previously, do you use different UPC and ISRC codes for each of the singles that are coming for the digital service providers, or is it better to use the same one? What's your advice?
Yeah, so we actually have to use different UPCs. So on our end for submitting, every new submission requires a new UPC. So even if we're submitting different versions, For like albums, when we have instant grats, that's obviously included underneath. But every time we submit, we do need a new UPC.
So would you recommend taking down one of the single version or one of the versions once the album fully comes out, so as not to separate streams, or what's your advice on that?
I don't think so. I think with, the options of like single artwork and stuff, like Spotify is very supportive to the singles and albums kind of layout. I do recommend for Apple and Amazon doing a pre-order and instant grats. Amazon is actually just instant grats, but it's kind of a cleaner version on their platform. So it'll be using the album artwork be submitted with the album. And then likewise with Apple, you'll have the pre-order and the instant grat singles. So yeah, it just depends on the DSP for sure.
Yeah, and just for people who are just sort of getting their toes dipped into this giant ocean of streaming and digital platforms, DSP is a digital service provider and platform, as well as, and maybe if you tell everybody what an instant grat is for people who don't know.
Oh, for sure, yeah. So when we submit an album for a pre-order or a pre-ad for Apple and also for Amazon, it's I guess traditionally the single is offered ahead of the album, but it is kind of included with the album offer. So when you see the singles up on Apple specifically, you will see the album, the rest of the tracks will be grayed out, and then you'll see the 2 or however many instant grats will be live on the platform.
It's a great way to keep engagement with your album before it comes out, keep engaging, having a reason to go back with your fans. I always recommend to my artists that they space them out at least a month apart, if not more, just to allow them to have a bit of life of their own. We're going to talk a little bit about converting fans from platform to platform, a little bit with Bram, who's really tracking this quite a bit. But also one of the things that just, in my opinion, is now, because it's so dense, we have so many streams available in the world. We've never had more music entering the marketplace every single day than we do today or tomorrow, is that for artists to always pair your single with a video or a tour announcement or something else that gives it a little bit more oomph in the industry so people can pay attention. And I don't know, Nicole, were you working at Cadence when it was new music? First, it was Tuesdays that they always came out, right? And then Fridays, and then now it seems to be a free for all. What is your take on that?
Yeah, it's really is very open for singles now. We do typically like to stick to Fridays for album release. But yeah, it does give a lot more flexibility. And if you have, options with your release for a video premiere or a big press hit or something like that, it makes it very flexible on our end to kind of find different anchor points for the singles. But I do definitely agree with the month lead time for singles as well. That's a big thing for us. It does just give the singles time to breathe and to find room on different playlists. So yeah, definitely good to consider.
So we've kind of ironed out a bit of the metadata as far as all the information that's needed in order to get your music up on a digital service provider, whether it be through an official distributor or whether you want to go DIY, which a lot of artists are doing as well, and doing it on something like TuneCore or CD Baby or Indie Pool. And I just want to go back to Bram, because now Bram, yes, you're a music fan, so you've been tracking the industry and what you see. But in your role at Music Canada, where you're actually looking at certifications, what is metadata so important in order to get a gold or platinum record, and how to track that?
For sure, definitely, like we were talking about ISRC codes. I mean, with single certifications, you can use your different remixes from a song. Not every song has a remix, but it is important to make sure that is clearly tracked, because we can combine different versions of a song in order to get that single certification. So yeah, say you do have an acoustic version that does well, or if you do have your kind of standard recorded version, we can combine those and that can be submitted towards certification. Now, along the way, especially if there's multiple songwriters involved, of course, this depends on the release. But if your song does do well and it does get to that point where you've reached that gold certification, people are going to want plaques as well. And we're not able to make a plaque until we can confirm that someone has actually written that song. We would never want to give a plaque to someone who claims that, but then we're not able to make that plaque for them. So it is important that along the way you are keeping that information accurate and reporting that where you can, so we can find that and help make those plaques happen.
We're going to talk about this a little later too, but keeping track of sales isn't just now in digital space; it's also in physical space. And so we were talking about this earlier in preparation for this panel, but you had an example recently with @venue keeping track of physical sales. And how does that work?
You want to make sure that if you are doing offstage sales, that you are keeping track with @venue and that is getting reported to a third party as well, because we will need that third party verification to allow that certification to happen. Again, we for the integrity of the program, we want to make sure that those units that were sold at your shows do belong in the hands of music consumers. And it's important before you're going on tour or before you're about to play that show to have your @venue account figured out, and that is properly reporting following the show. And that I think MRC data would be a place where that does get reported to. So make sure that before you take off and put that show behind you, make sure that you've accurately reported those sales.
Do you think that there's another industry that has more acronyms than the music industry? I'm not sure.
I don't think so. No, I think we win there. Yeah.
We win. We get gold certification on a number of acronyms in our industry.
Right.
I just wanted to add to that too, because as a session player, I've played on 70 plus records, and sometimes you go and do a session. You show up and you bring your instrument and you play on a track, and you don't always know whether or not it's going to be used in the final master. There are some programs now that are built into Pro Tools where you can actually, track where you actually end up. And so say they used my fiddle on a song, and it showed up in the master, my tag would be embedded in the track and I would already be referenced and I would be given that credit. But if I played on a track and it didn't come through in the master, then I wouldn't say, oh, I remember playing on that, and then sign up. But one good thing to do too, if you're an artist and you've used session players or other people in the studio, is to notify them. I mean, it's actually just a common courtesy to send your session players a note to tell them what tracks they were on, because it's up to them to register for their neighboring rights, where they'll get paid for the work that they did for you. So that's just a little side note on common courtesy in the recording studio and how to use data to help your friends get paid. Carl says the military is made of acronyms. That is true. Okay, so music and the military. We got the double M's of acronyms. Nicole, you mentioned something about different types of audio, and I got a little lost because there were some acronyms in there. So maybe you could just do a little backup and just talk about some of the audio that's available now on different DSPs and what that means.
Standard audio is generally what we submit across all DSPs. It's 16-bit WAV files. WAV files are really important. We can't do anything with MP3 files. So the waves is what we need. And then traditionally MFIT, it was made for iTunes. So that's the high-res 24-bit audio. Kind of interchangeable, I guess, now with HRA as more platforms are supporting. So Amazon has their 3 tiers. So they have the high-res audio. And Apple also recently started their spatial audio initiative. So that's kind of a brand new thing that we're looking into on our end as well and being able to supply. But it's just it's a good thing to be aware of all these offerings and kind of bespoke things that you can deliver across the DSPs.
So by spatial, do you mean anything to do with Jeff Bezos' new space program or Sir Richard Branson? What do you mean by spatial audio? Help.
I think it's like surround sound. It's pretty cool. I think it's debuted, I want to say a couple weeks ago, but it really does make a big difference. I think I even listened to it on my phone and I could really tell. So it's definitely, I think probably all DSPs are starting to move that way. It's just good to kind of keep an ear out for the advancements as they come.
And something good to think about too when you're talking to your mastering engineer to make sure that you are aware of all the different options there to how it will be mastered. And another little pro tip here from an independent record label owner, but always try to get versions of your songs that don't have the lyrics, don't have your singing on them. They don't have vocals because, and get those mastered as well. Because when you're trying to get some singing licensing, they like to have versions that are clean, that don't have singing on them so they can really place them properly. That's just a little pro tip from me. Bram, I think you are the most audiophile person that I know. And so what do you listen to? What platform do you listen to because of audio?
Oh, well, I do listen to Spotify, and they do have an option to go, I think, as high resolution as you can. I think it's like 256 or something that you can see in the settings. I use my Sony headphones here, and they sound excellent on there. I have dabbled a little bit in the kind of hi-fi options now, like Amazon has one and Tidal has one. You really need to have the equipment, I think, to hear the difference there. You got to spend a little more on those headphones, which I have not been able to do yet. But music's sounding pretty good right now. It's pretty interesting to go back to stuff that even from 15 years ago, maybe, or 20 years ago, especially pop music, I find. Go back and listen to a Backstreet Boys or an NSYNC song on like a good pair of Bluetooth headphones. You'll be astonished at how much detail was kind of lost to us through our TVs or through just our Discman headphones at the time. So that's always fun for me to just go back and listen to. But I'm excited to try the spatial audio. I haven't had a chance to try that yet, and I've been seeing that marketed lately. So yeah, excited to see what that sounds like.
Very cool. Well, I think it's the 20-year anniversary of Wannabe. Is that right?
I think so. Yeah.
Maybe it's more than 20 years. Anyway,
might be 25.
I'll be 25. Yeah, I'll go back and I'll take a listen. That's good advice, Bram. Alan Willard has put in the chat about filing the AFM 84 contract. Thank you, Alan, rep of the AFM. That's very good advice. Ensure that multiple revenue streams that emanate from new uses of music are recognized and then get to the rightful people. Andrea's got a question about TuneCore upload. Is it better to just upload a 24-bit wave that will satisfy these requirements, or do you know if they ask for specific ones?
I think on our end, like we have to specify between standard and high res, but they might have a different sort of back end submission. So I do think like 24-bit on its own is accepted at all DSPs. So if you just have that, I think that's totally fine.
And it says CD Baby's not accepting 24. I think they're probably going to catch up. It feels as though, we're really in that time where someone's coming ahead and then everyone's just scrambling to try to produce their own version of these things. And I think we're going to see a little bit more of that, actually, talking about another component that's really important, which is the fact that consumers are being offered so many different products. So yeah, if you want to have this spatial audio, go to this platform, or if you want to have this available. One thing I love about Amazon Prime, just going into a TV world for a second, is when you're watching a TV show and you just move your mouse and you can see all the actors who are in that particular scene and what song is playing. And I think, I'm hoping that they'll go somewhere like that in the future with music, where you could see all the people who are playing and say, oh my God, I love that drummer. What else did that drummer play on? This might just be also, as a session musician, wanting to see some recognition. But I think that there's some really cool breakthroughs being made. And I had a note from somebody earlier about lossless. Nicole, what is lossless, and what does that mean, and what platforms offer that?
Well, I want to say lossless, to me, I think of like the HRA and the MFIT equivalent. I can't speak too much on it. But yeah, it is just like kind of a higher offering. And I think, consumers are kind of looking for that more. So it's good just to be able to offer it and have that kind of differentiation.
I mean, it just feels as if, it's a consumer's market, but I think one of the things that we're going to try to get to, and we will in a bit, is just also how can we use the data that we're putting in, and then the data that the consumers are giving us back in order to maximize our reach as artists in this time when there's just so much noise. And another way to maximize that reach is artwork. And I know that there are specifics that you have to submit for the DSPs, for the digital service providers. But I wonder if we could speak a little bit to that, what you need to submit, and then how that's changing, again, with Apple making some interesting moves. And then we'll talk a bit about branding. So Nicole, do you want to start off?
Sure. Yeah. So, for artwork, I guess I'll start with the kind of the specifications. So high-res artwork is always the best. We require a minimum of 1500 by 1500, but 3000 is ideal. Usually a JPEG or a TIFF file is great. And for some of the, I guess, restrictions, we just always have to make sure the artwork does match the title and the name. So if there's anything different, or if you have, say, a duplicate song backed with, like, that's just always good to consider, because we usually just end up having to kind of tweak them. We can't submit them unless it's kind of directly correlated. For branding, it's very interesting, obviously, with different DSPs offering instant grats versus singles. But if you are doing a single artwork, it's always great because there's so many DSPs that do support that. And aligning your single artwork with an album release is always great. So with the branding, an example I can think of is Felix Cartel did a really great job with his singles. All the titles were on each of the artwork, but kind of stylized a little different. So just when you see it on the DSP, it kind of all looks like one package. And then, with the album artwork, very interesting. Apple has animated artwork now, and I believe they've opened it up to all releases, which is really cool. You can have that up with the pre-order too, so you can kind of have a long lead before the album release. So
that's neat. Is it like animated? You mean like it moves, or?
Yeah, it's really cool. Like, you can do kind of really subtle things. I've seen full kind of artwork moving. I think a really cool one I liked was Girl in Red. It's because like actual artwork, and it's kind of all the little parts are moving. So it's a cool offering, and it kind of obviously always looks good on their end too, that you're kind of doing something bespoke for Apple. So yeah.
I was gonna say, it also helps for us from Music Canada when we do see single artwork, especially for an artist like Felix Cartel, an artist that has been certified. We do have our social media channels for our Gold Platinum account, where we'll announce certifications and try and celebrate with the fans. And we love sharing that single artwork in our graphics. If there is just the album artwork, it can be confusing for fans who might just see that right away and think, oh great, that album's certified now, and they might kind of run with that information, but we do want to make sure that we're assigning single artwork to the single award. And it's more for fans. Fans seem to really love having all those different pieces of artwork that they can kind of look back to as well, especially as time goes on. You can kind of look back on like the throwbacks, and people do love sharing that single artwork. So just a note on that.
Yeah. Have there been any artists that you saw having really strong brands that you thought were excellent?
Well, I think Tate McRae's done a wonderful job this year, really getting out there and just being a rising artist. But if you look at her album, I mean, every song has its own single artwork assigned to it, and you can still see that in Spotify. I think Scott Heltman as well did a wonderful job with his last album, and the singles that were coming out with that had their own brand to them, and did relate to the music videos as well. So those are just a couple examples kind of off the top of my head here.
I love watching when artists do that right, and it's really hits, because again, used to be the rule of three, where you'd see something 3 times and then maybe take an action. So you see 3 times, have a Coke or whatever, and you might go buy a Coke. And now it seems to be like rule of 33. I don't know. You sort of have to see something that many times in order to actually take an action in this saturated marketplace. And especially when an artist can brand really well, so that even if it's a different thing, you're still kind of getting that subliminal message to take that action with that artist and create that sort of an impetus. And this is going to bring us right into pitching and pitching for the DSPs. But this, again, it can be whether you're an official distributor, where you have somebody like Nicole who would pitch to the DSPs on behalf of the artists, and labels that that she works with, or it can be whether you're doing it yourself with Spotify for Artists, and you're trying to get seen by an editorial playlister. But it also works into when you have a campaign with a publicist, or even if you're doing it yourself. I think one of the biggest things that we talk about this, even just myself with my artists, my career, what I've seen my friends do, what I've seen colleagues do, and then again, looking at what we do at Fontana and Cadence, is building that story of the release. And when it really truly unites with the music, one person I thought was really excellent at this was Weather Station, who came out with Ignorance recently. The album artwork looks amazing. It has a really authentic climate emergency message that goes with the, you know, and I don't want to talk about, I don't want to lessen the impact of that. That's very important, but also just that it felt so authentic and that was all branded really well and beautifully packaged so that it does feel like a story. So maybe, Nicole, when you're going to pitch to a DSP, what do you sort of gather, and how can we as artists help you tell the best story to the service provider and the editorial playlists?
I definitely agree. Like, the overall story is kind of the most important, and kind of fitting all the pieces in to kind of build that narrative. So, I mean, right off the top, like a quote about the song or a story about like the full project, kind of getting like the artist's perspective is really, really important. Along with like the timeline, the full release time, that's always good. DSPs, like to see kind of what's coming and how they can kind of plan on their end. A listening link is very important. These are kind of all the main things. Press photos are helpful, but yeah, then everything else that you're kind of doing on your end too, marketing points, radio, any sync, any past press, like it all really helps. And it kind of goes along with the metadata idea too, like the more, the better. Like, you can never really send us too much, and we can always kind of pick through and like make it into a concise message. But I know on some of the tools, it's hard. You only have a certain amount of characters to submit. But I think just all of that info, and so providing us with playlist targets, I think is really important as well. If you have a specific idea of where you think your music would place on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, it just shows that you do have that kind of full awareness of the platform. There's so many crossover playlists now too. It's pretty cool. So if you feel like you kind of, could fit in one genre or another, like just kind of requesting those, it'll make sure it goes to the correct editor on the DSP side. I think probably one example I can think of too that we worked with recently was Jaylee Wolf. She just put out her debut EP in June, and it was just phenomenal. Everything came together so well. They kind of, gave everything to us in a very like fully branded, very aware way. We were able to convey the story very clearly. The videos were amazing. It all kind of came in on time. So it was just, the story just kind of told itself in the end. But yeah.
I think another thing that you sort of said too, and it sort of goes back to the very first point, which is giving yourself the runway to get all the assets in place in order to allow your whole team, or just you, it doesn't matter, to make the most of it. And I feel I've seen this happen so many times, and I've always had that impetus to do it too. I'm so excited when I'm done my album. Also, I'm so sick of listening to my own album because I've probably heard it about 1,000 times at that point, and you just want it out in the world. But again, we're entrepreneurs. We're entrepreneurs. We've got to invest in ourselves to get the dividends. So hiring a great publicist, trying to get those good pull quotes that you can then include whenever you submit for playlisting and all those things, it is worth it. It will come together in the end, and then you have a package that not only can you be proud of and looking forward for that campaign, but then you can launch whatever you're going to do next on that campaign. I think that's sort of one of the things that we've been returning to. Bram, do you have anything to add on that?
No, I think Nicole covered it pretty well there. Yeah, no, I think that was good.
Amazing. That's what we like to hear. There's a question in the chat, which I'll come back to at the end. But I want to just get in a little bit about the differences in some of the DSPs, because I think that's going to lead us a little bit into how we can use data for us, against these tech giants. We can use them to help our careers, but how do you what are you looking at? I mean, there's obviously different ages that people are using different DSPs and different platforms and that kind of thing. So if you want to just talk about a little bit about the differences, that would be great.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's just being very aware of your personal audience and, where your music is kind of gaining traction. All platforms, have different offerings in many ways. But you can use the tools like Spotify for Artists. You can even identify like where people are listening. And I mean, that's also great for, your personal advertising and stuff, where your audiences and potential audiences are. And then being aware of like crossover playlists or platforms as well. TikTok's a big one now where, you can gain your popularity there and like learning how to transfer your audience over. Another example, I'm bringing up Felix again, but he did a really great job with that too. Like for an example, using Twitch with Amazon, doing the live streams. And then with TikTok, he did a remix of a meme banned from the Gucci store. It went viral. So we were able to like actually distribute that as a track and just kind of, really seeing where the crossovers are. I think it's really important too.
Thinking about marketing on those DSPs and opportunities where they are, and what's out there for us.
Yeah, Spotify does, offer advertising. I mean, you can also go the DIY approach and, promote your music on different platforms on your different socials. And if you're using, the tagging, that's always really helpful. I know like Amazon has templates, which are great. So you can, promote your music on Alexa or on Amazon. So there's definitely like, good DIY ways to do it. And that's always a good place to start.
And each DSP has, like you said, sort of specific requirements or suggested recommendations onto how to best use them. Like you mentioned, like Alexa, get your fans asking Alexa to play that. You can see on Amazon for artists as well. They now have their artist platform, as does Apple, as does Spotify, and just trying to engage with fans like that, trying to get your fans to make playlists. Obviously, it's very time consuming, and not every artist is going to be able to take the time to make each DSP satisfy their requirements. But there's also some little tips too if you do get on a playlist, to tag the DSP, give them a shout out, give a thanks. I think also another good just way to be a good citizen, to look for other artists who are on that playlist and tag them too, and say that you're honored to be on the playlist with certain people. I think that's always a nice way to kind of get a bit of shine, and do your market research. I think you mentioned too, Nicole, looking at what playlists you'd be right for, and I don't think my Celtic folk music would be great on some kind of classic rock playlist, so I wouldn't go pitch that. But also it would be great for me to do my research and look up, okay, so where is my sort of Celtic folk music? Who else is in that space? What other artists am I following? How are they engaging with their fans? How are they successfully finding that kind of an audience? And I think everything is so available. I mean, we have this amazing duality where, yes, we're up against the most competition, and the most sort of noise that artists have ever been up against. But we also have all these tools. I think we're kind of talking about that. And Bram, I mean, I've been your pupil on the TikTok front, listening to things that you've seen. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that conversion, how to convert your fans to the platform that you want them on and where you want to be able to make some money.
For sure. And I just want to add a point first to what Nicole was talking about, especially with targeting, with these campaigns. I think a common question I do get is from Canadian artists who've had success around the world who are now looking to get certified. We certify Canadian consumption. So just, if you are a Canadian artist, that's great. You've had success in other territories. Well, your certification will apply to that specific territory. So we don't certify based on global streams or global consumption. It has to be Canadian specific. So if a Canadian certification is what you are after, definitely try and target, the markets that you're seeing your music picked up on, and just keep going further on that, because once that, if that song then lands on a playlist, of course, then the streams can continue growing. But that, of course, can help with touring and everything else as we get back to touring. So you mentioned TikTok. I mean, I'm not active on TikTok, but I am fascinated by it and watching success stories happen. And I think we're approaching a bit of a golden age right now of artists who started there, who didn't anticipate success, or a gold single, I'll say. Like, of course, every artist wants to achieve success, but I've got a few examples here. I mean, Robin Ondolini, who's signed with Warner currently. I mean, her song F-150 started off as just it just went viral on TikTok. This was just an organic thing that happened. People really related to the theme of the song and the lyrics in it, and that went on its way to becoming gold and to getting her signed. And that was really cool to watch happen. And here we are now in 2021. We're seeing these success stories from maybe 2020 or a little bit before then start to get certified. Jessie is another good example. And that's something from this year. And that's an artist that really just sang a catchy hook that she had come up with, and that got the attention of Jamie Fine, and then that got the attention of Ryan Tedder of One Republic. Next thing you know, that song's now officially platinum, and she's also a signed artist. Felix Cartel, great example. I think Loud Luxury are also really active on TikTok, and the goal I'm seeing with artists is, yes, have people use your music if you can. If there is that lyric that people can catch on to, and if they can come up with their own dance, that's cool. But converting that into a stream, you want to make sure you have your link in your TikTok. That's very easy to get to your account on Spotify or Apple Music, wherever you're trying to target that. I think Spotify tends to be the most popular in Canada, so that may be where you go first. But that is the challenge right now. How can you convert those people into listeners and to have that hit that's already a hit? We all know that song, but how does that now get into even further on-demand consumption that can be certified? So it's been fascinating watching that happen on TikTok. I think the biggest example would be Bella Porch right now. She just got certified, and really Bella Porch started off as a TikTok star and ended up getting signed to Warner as well. Not everyone's going to be Bella Porch, but everyone can aspire for something like that. And if you are active on that platform, it seems to really be taking off right now.
And then, because I know that, again, we talked about this too, that as tech makes these giant leaps forward, the more information we can provide them, the better, so that there can be some kind of correlation and a fingerprint on those things. And TikTok is now being licensed, is that correct? So that people can get paid from their streams?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah. Nicole, maybe you've seen some more on that, on the licensing front.
Yeah, I know we just, our deal started a few months ago. So it's all very new on our end as well. It's kind of an automatic thing that we are distributing to TikTok. So it is kind of, one of our big priorities. So, yeah.
That's great. And CMRA also has a deal now with TikTok to be licensed. In not just, and I want to be full disclosure here, because I've got my two wonderful guests here, but I've also got Catherine Jones of Connect Music Licensing. Connect is a place where you can get your ISRC codes when you need them for future reference. But I've got her on text support over here, because there's some kind of very texty answers and questions in here in the chat. So we can I've got her sort of phone a friend over here on my text app going. So we'll get to that more in-depth questions. And if we don't get to your question, we can always reply with some of those most asked questions when we come back to everybody with the videos for all of the 3 webinars, which we'll get to. But Bram, you touched on something, and I really want to get to this and have some time for the description, which is, and maybe Catherine can also answer some questions in the chat if she is there. If you look for Catherine Jones in the chat, she can also answer technical questions about Connect Music Licensing. Sorry to put you on the spot there, Catherine, but you are excellent. Oh, there she is. Amazing. So Bram, I want to talk a little bit about thresholds, because we've talked about how to, hey, Catherine, thanks for joining our webinar.
No problem.
Unprovoked. This is great.
I can speak faster than I can text, so.
Perfect. I love it. surprise special guest. It's like I'm hosting Jimmy Kimmel or something. This is great. Bram, so I want to talk about the thresholds, because I know that we've talked a lot about how that you can get, and the metadata makes it possible to track all those thresholds. But how do I get a gold record, man? Tell me.
Okay, well, if you are releasing your single, I think the thing to remember is that 150 on-demand audio streams equals 1 unit towards a Music Canada certification. A gold single in Canada is 40,000 units. So that would be about 6 million Canadian streams through, that's Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, any of the on-demand audio services. And of course, track sales, that would be 1 unit. We don't have a conversion rate for that. You can apply that to your total. Albums are a little different. You can take, if you do have an album coming out and you've got a few different plans for your different singles, you can combine all those songs that are on that album. And you can convert those streams at a rate of 1,500 to 1. So that would be 1 album unit. And again, if album sales we're counting, that would just be 1 unit as well. That is also 40,000. So 40,000 is the gold standard here in Canada.
That's good to know. Is there?
Yes, and sorry to interrupt. Also for album sales, that includes TEA as well. So that'd be track equivalent albums. So that's so I talked about the streaming equivalent. That's 1,500 to 1. But if you also take your track sales, that can be 10 to 1, and that is part of that conversion towards that 40,000. Sorry to interrupt, Miranda. Please go on.
No, I was just that was a lot of numbers coming at me really quick. So I just wanted to be able to offer to the participants where they can find all that information, so they don't have to just write it down or memorize it. Absolutely.
So you can go to musiccanada.com. We've got our gold platinum section there. And then so just click the gold platinum heading and you'll see some kind of FAQ on the right side. All of this is listed on the Music Canada website in that gold platinum section. And you can also see our public database as well to get the latest certifications and success stories.
Amazing. Thank you. We're going to take a couple questions that we've got here in the chat. One's from Jeff Hardy, and it is, I've been using my ISRC code provided by Connect, but I also have an ISRC from DistroKid for digital streaming. I began using 2 as they don't seem to conflict, and then started to use my own Connect provided one for both. What's the issue or advantage with either of those? Catherine, can you jump to that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So potentially big issues. ISRC stands for International Standard Recording Code, and it applies to an individual recording, whether that's an audio recording or an audio visual recording. The codes that you get from Connect is a registrant code. So a label or an individual artist would apply for a registrant code, and then you create your own ISRC codes from that registrant code. When you get an ISRC code from a distributor, it is the full ISRC code, and it is applicable only to the particular recording that they are distributing for you, which is different from an album code, which is a UPC. So if you have put 2 different ISRC codes on one recording, there's going to be confusion in the ecosystem. Ultimately, you're the same owner, so you're probably getting paid properly, but it does cause confusion in the landscape as a whole. So you just have to keep in mind what the difference is between a registrant code and an ISRC code. And you can go, I put the link to the ISRC page in the chat. So there's some FAQs in there that can help answer some questions, but anything, you can go ahead and email isrc@connectmusic.ca for clarification.
I wanted to touch on a couple of things before we have to end the session. And again, our lines are open afterwards if people have other questions they want to send in and ask. All great resources over at Music Canada, Connect, also Cadence. Nicole's a great source of amazing info. One thing that, Nicole, you've done for me, which I really value quite a lot, and there's also a free version that anybody can do, which is the Pivot and Smart URL, like a Linkfire or something like that. I just wanted to circle back because I had a question come in about that. Do you want to just describe what those are?
Yeah, for sure. So we use Linkfire as like an overall landing page. We generally use it for releases once they're out, but I believe there is a pre-save function in that as well. There's also many other platforms you can use for pre-save. There's Feature FM, presave.io. They're all a little different. Some you can use Giphies in them. Some offer different platforms. So yeah, good to kind of try them out, but it is kind of a very more like a standard thing that the DSPs really like. When you have a pre-save for the album, you can do pre-save on Spotify, pre-add on Apple. I believe Deezer and Tidal also offer the same, but the link fire for a release that's out is great. It gives people a lot of option. You can include a preview of the track as well. I mean, your music video, and then like Bandcamp or your official store, you can really include anything. So it's a good kind of one click and gives people that kind of browsing option. Yeah, so great. Like definitely good to include for every release, for singles and albums as well.
Yeah. And the other great thing about that is sort of, again, what we're talking about where, yeah, these tech giants are taking a lot of our data, but we can also sort of take it back and use it to sort of jujitsu how we can then target our fans. So when you have a link fire or a smart URL, that's the free version, you can then find out who's clicking on that, how many clicks you had going through to Spotify, who you had going to Tidal, who you had going to YouTube Music. And then you can figure out when you've got money, what kind of an ad buy you'd like to do. And then you can figure out through your Spotify for artists or your Apple Music for artists, who's listening to your music. You can use the data they're feeding back to you to then retarget the people who are listening. I heard a great success story from a Canadian artist who had a track that came out in French, and they went through all the back channels like Spotify for artists, found out that it was actually getting listened to a ton in Paris. He ended up flying over to Paris, did a show there, and then got signed to an imprint, a really cool imprint in Paris. So there's certain ways that we can sort of double down on the tech giants and use their data to help us, which I think is a great mission. And I know that there's a lot of spends as well now on trying to get influencers to use your music in a TikTok video. Again, that's coming up on some grant applications or where you want to do your marketing spends. But these are all really good things to start thinking about as you want to reinvest in yourself as an entrepreneur.
I just think it's a really interesting time. Like, I know we've talked about TikTok a bunch here, but that is where, just music fans are gravitating to right now. We've got almost 2 billion streams a week in Canada. So people are listening. People want to find their new music. If they're finding it on TikTok, then we need to convert them to active listeners and on-demand listeners. We want to give more of those gold records. We want to see more of those success stories.
I love that. And again, there's just never been more tools for us as artists to use. And I know it can be really overwhelming and quite frustrating sometimes, but cutting through the noise and finding those ways to really separate ourselves and our authentic voices from the rest of the flock is really important, and data can help us do that. And I just wanted to add one more thing just from personal experience. I use a platform called Disco. There are other available ones that you can use. I don't want to just be endorsing one particular platform, but it's for sync and licensing. And the great part about that, again, it's where metadata is your friend. Nobody who is a music supervisor wants to go digging through emails with attached files or incomplete metadata, and using something where you make sure that you have everything all ready to go, like a Disco. They can just download it immediately. Everything is there, including the lyrics, including all the codes, including everything they need in order to make a choice whether or not to put your music into a show, a TV show or a movie. And you can upload both the version with lyrics and singing, and the version, just the instrumental version, so they can hear it right away with one click. I think the more you can provide, again, on the metadata and the comfort and ease, that helps people in our industry to help you, have success, but also for consumers.
Just 2 main points for metadata and all the information you provide. The more, the better. Because you want to get paid, and it's good to have, everything reflect properly on DSPs. So that would be, I guess, a good takeaway point. Also, if you have any questions too after, I can be reached on LinkedIn or Instagram. And yeah, happy to answer any more questions.
Bram, I'm going to leave the last word to you.
I thank you very much, Miranda, for doing this. And I hope the information I've given has been helpful here. You can email goldplat@musiccanada.com if you do have any questions about that. Again, we do want to hand out more gold records. Miranda, just because your music you think is niche, I mean, that doesn't mean that it can't be certified these days. It can land on a playlist somewhere. Let's get it on TikTok. Let's make that happen. So yes, thank you everybody for joining in.
Thank you so much to Nicole and to Bram and to our very special surprise guest, Catherine. And thanks again to Ontario Creates for supporting this and sponsoring this series. And we hope to see you all next week with Financial Literacy for Artists. Thank you.